The day my brother yelled at me in front of everyone, telling me not to come near his children because I was not family, something inside me snapped in a way I never expected. But before that moment, before the shouting, before the humiliation, before I quietly canceled the monthly deposit I had been sending him for nearly 3 years, there was a long history between us that most people would never guess. And that's where this story really begins. It didn't start with anger. It started with love, sacrifice, and the kind of loyalty you only give to someone you truly believe is part of you. Growing up, my brother and I were never the closest, but I always believed we shared something unshakable: blood, memories, the same roof, and the kind of bond that's supposed to survive every storm. I was the quiet one, the steady one, the one who worked hard and tried not to trouble anyone. He was loud, confident, sometimes careless, but charming enough that people forgave him easily. Even when he messed up, he always had someone to defend him. And more times than I can count, that someone was me. As we got older, life changed in different ways for both of us. I built a career, saved money, and tried to live responsibly. He started a family early, struggled with jobs, and slipped into financial stress he never fully escaped. When he asked for help the first time, it wasn't even really an ask. It was more like a desperate conversation where he tried to act calm but couldn't hide the fear in his voice. He said he was behind on bills. He said he didn't want his kids to suffer. He said he was trying his best, but sometimes a person's best wasn't enough. I didn't judge him. I didn't question whether it was my responsibility. I just helped. I thought that's what family does: show up when someone is drowning. 1 month of helping slowly turned into 3, then 6, then a whole year. When things didn't improve, he suggested something more stable. A plan. A monthly deposit, just until he got back on his feet. I agreed, partly because I cared and partly because I didn't want his kids growing up feeling the fear of not having enough. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself he appreciated it. And I told myself that even if we weren't the closest siblings, this support meant we were at least connected in some meaningful way. But what I didn't know then was that people don't always treat support as love. Sometimes they treat it as entitlement. When my brother's life became more comfortable, he didn't stop to think about how much of that comfort came from the extra help he received every month. Instead, he grew used to it. The thank you messages became shorter. The calls became less frequent. Eventually, even the updates disappeared. My deposit was still being used, but I wasn't part of anything else. Not conversations. Not family moments. Not decisions. I was helpful but invisible. Still, I didn't say anything. I told myself his life was busy. Kids, work, responsibilities. Maybe he just didn't have time. Maybe I was expecting too much. Maybe it didn't matter. Things continued like that until one Saturday afternoon. My brother invited the whole family to his house for a small get-together. Birthdays for the kids, he said. Just a simple gathering. I didn't usually get invited to events like that, so the message took me by surprise. I even smiled. I thought maybe things were changing. Maybe he finally wanted to reconnect, not just accept help from a distance. I bought gifts for the kids. Not expensive ones, just thoughtful things I knew they'd enjoy. I wrapped them carefully and even wrote little notes. I wanted the kids to feel loved. I wanted my brother to feel supported. I wanted the day to be peaceful. But the second I stepped inside the house, I sensed something off. People were talking and laughing, but the energy felt strange. My brother barely looked at me. His wife gave me a stiff smile. The kids seemed unsure, like they weren't sure if they were allowed to run toward me or not. I brushed it off, thinking maybe they were just busy with guests. Then, as the children played in the living room, one of them, my niece, ran toward me excitedly. Kids don't fake their affection. She saw me and smiled the biggest smile, reaching out for a hug. And without even thinking, I opened my arms. But before she reached me, my brother stepped between us so fast it felt like the whole room froze. "Don't come near my children," he shouted, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You're not family. Do you understand? Stay away." The words cut deeper than anything I had ever heard from him. Not because they were said loudly, not because there were witnesses, but because they came from someone I had spent years supporting silently, without asking for anything in return. Someone I trusted enough to help month after month. Someone I believed still cared on some level. People in the room looked shocked, confused, some even embarrassed. But no one said anything. Not even his wife. Not even my parents. They just stood there. I felt my hands shaking, not with anger but with disbelief. My niece stopped in her tracks, her little smile fading as she looked between us, unsure of what she had done wrong. And I stood there, holding the gift I had brought for her, feeling like I had suddenly become a stranger in a house where I once thought I belonged. I didn't argue with him. I didn't shout back. I didn't ask why. I slowly put the gift down, turned around and walked out of the house without looking back. Every step felt heavy, like I was walking away from years of memories I didn't know were so fragile. And that night, after hours of replaying the moment in my head, something inside me finally changed. I opened my laptop, logged into my bank app and canceled the monthly deposit he depended on. I didn't send a message explaining it. I didn't warn him. I didn't justify myself. I just stopped. But that decision, quiet, simple and long overdue, was only the beginning. Because what happened after that? Well, let's just say the silence that followed was louder than the words he threw at me. And the real story of how everything unfolded next is something you won't believe. And that is where things truly begin to unravel. I didn't sleep the night after I canceled the deposit. I thought I would feel relieved, like a weight had finally lifted off my shoulders, but instead the quiet of my apartment felt heavier than ever. It was strange how a single moment, one sentence shouted in anger, could reopen every old wound I thought I had learned to live with. I kept replaying the scene over and over again, searching for some sign, some hint, something that would explain why my brother had reacted like that. But nothing made sense. The more I thought about it, the more confused I became. I knew canceling the deposit would eventually reach him. The money always landed in his account on the same date, the same time. It was part of his monthly routine, almost like rent or bills. He never acknowledged it, but I knew he counted on it. And now that it was gone, I wondered if anger would be his first reaction or shock or maybe just silence. Maybe he wouldn't even notice right away. Maybe his life had gotten so stable with the extra help that missing one transfer wouldn't feel like a crisis. But deep down, I already knew that wasn't true. My brother had built a rhythm around my support. Even if he never thanked me for it, he relied on it. Or maybe he relied on the idea that I would never stop. Maybe he thought I was too soft, too loyal, too predictable. Maybe he thought yelling at me wouldn't change anything because he assumed I'd forgive him eventually, the same way I always had when we were younger. But this time felt different. And I didn't know how to handle the sinking feeling that came with that difference. Over the next few days, everything around me felt tense, even though nothing was happening on the surface. There were no calls from him, no messages, no apology, not even a confused, "Hey, did something happen?" It was like he didn't notice I had left the gathering early, or maybe he noticed but didn't care. That thought bothered me more than his actual words. The idea that he could dismiss me so quickly after everything made something deep inside me twist in a way I couldn't ignore. My parents didn't say anything either. They had seen everything that happened, yet not a single call came from them to check on me. I wasn't sure if they were trying to avoid conflict, or if they secretly agreed with him. That part hurt more than I wanted to admit. Family was supposed to be a safe place, but suddenly it felt like every part of it was shifting into something I didn't recognize. On the fourth day, my phone finally buzzed with a message. For a second, I felt a strange mix of dread and hope. Maybe it was him. Maybe he wanted to talk. Maybe he wanted to explain the outburst or take responsibility for it. Maybe. But it wasn't him. It was his wife. She sent a short voice note instead of text. Her messages were always like that, quick, clipped, the kind of tone you use when talking to a stranger you're not sure you trust. I hesitated before opening it, bracing myself. Her voice came through cold and tired, like she'd practiced the message before sending it. She said they noticed the missing deposit. She asked if everything was okay, but her tone didn't sound concerned. It sounded expectant. Like she was waiting for me to say the deposit was just delayed or that I had made some mistake. She didn't mention what happened at the gathering. She didn't mention the yelling. She didn't mention the humiliation. It was as if that moment didn't exist at all. I didn't respond. Not because I wanted to be petty, but because I genuinely didn't know what to say. How do you explain that you're tired of being treated like an outsider while still paying like an insider? How do you explain that you reached your breaking point after years of staying quiet? I listened to her voice message one more time before deleting it. It didn't feel right to reply in the state I was in. The next day my mother called. Her voice was low, almost whispery, like she didn't want anyone around her to hear the conversation. She didn't ask if I was okay. She didn't ask how I felt. She jumped straight to the deposit as though that was the only part that mattered. She said, "Your brother is under a lot of stress." He didn't mean what he said. The words felt rehearsed, like something she had been told to say. She didn't mention the tone he used or the crowd of people watching, or the child caught in the middle. She didn't mention my hurt. She only talked about his stress, his responsibilities, his children, his life. I felt the familiar tug of guilt, the one I had felt since childhood, the one that always pushed me to care for him even when he didn't care back. But this time the guilt wasn't winning so easily. I told my mother I needed space, and before she could argue, I ended the call. The silence afterward was suffocating, but it was still better than pretending everything was okay. As the days passed, I found myself thinking more about the years that led to this moment. The times I had stepped in quietly, helping without being asked. The birthdays I attended with gifts I could barely afford. The moments I offered advice he ignored. The nights he complained about everything wrong in his life but never once asked how I was doing. I realized I had spent so long being the dependable one that no one ever stopped to think I might need something too. Not money, not gifts, just basic respect. Basic appreciation. Basic acknowledgement that I was part of the family. But maybe I never was. The thought made my stomach twist. I didn't want to believe it, yet the evidence was all there. The way he looked through me that day. The way the room fell silent. The way my parents acted like the deposit mattered more than the hurt. I tried to distract myself with work, with cleaning, with anything that made the hours pass quietly. But the tension didn't go away. It grew heavier, like something in the air around me was shifting, preparing for the next wave. On the 7th day, something happened that I didn't expect. My brother finally called. I stared at the screen, heart pounding. Part of me wanted to decline the call, part of me wanted to answer and scream, and part of me just wanted to hear his voice, hoping it would sound different for once. Gentle, apologetic, human. I answered. But the first thing he said wasn't, "Hello." It wasn't sorry. It wasn't even my name. He said, "Why did you stop the deposit?" No emotion. No softness. Just a demand. The disappointment hit me so hard I had to sit down. I tried to speak calmly, to explain that his words hurt me, that his reaction shocked me, that I needed time. But before I even finished the sentence, he cut me off. He said I was overreacting. He said I was making a big deal out of nothing. He said families fight all the time and I shouldn't punish him for one moment. He said I was being selfish. That word, selfish, echoed in my chest like a bruise being touched again. I didn't shout. I didn't argue. I just listened as he spoke, realizing more with every word that he didn't see me as family. Not really. Not unless I was useful. When he paused, expecting me to give in, I quietly said, "We'll talk later," and hung up. But the conversation didn't resolve anything. In fact, it only deepened the confusion and raised new questions I wasn't ready to face. Because something in his tone, something in the way he spoke, made me realize there was more going on behind the scenes. Something he wasn't saying. Something he didn't want me to know. And as the days went on, the tension didn't fade. It grew. Because the truth was, canceling that deposit didn't just expose the cracks between us. It uncovered something else. Something hidden, something unsettling, something that would eventually force me to question everything I thought I knew about my family. And the real shock was still waiting ahead. The days after that phone call felt strangely heavy, as if something in the air had shifted, but I couldn't describe what it was. I could feel the tension growing even though no one openly said anything. My brother didn't call again, at least not right away, but the silence didn't feel peaceful. It felt like the quiet before a storm, thick, uncertain, waiting for something to break. And the more I thought about the way he'd spoken to me, the more unsettled I became. I kept replaying the tone he used. It wasn't frustration or hurt, or even anger at losing support he had counted on. It sounded closer to fear, but not fear of losing the money. It was more like fear of something else that losing the money would expose. That was what stuck with me. My brother had many flaws, but he wasn't the kind of person who panicked about change. Yet he sounded rattled, like the deposit being gone created a problem he didn't want me to know about. I tried to push the thought away, but it kept coming back, and soon it became a new kind of conflict. One between what I wanted to believe and what I was slowly realizing might be true. In the middle of all this, another unexpected person reached out. My cousin David. He wasn't someone I talked to often, but he had been at the gathering that day. He sent a casual message asking if everything was okay. I almost lied and said I was fine, but something about the way he asked made me pause. I typed back a simple, honest reply, "Not really." He called immediately. His voice was calm, gentle, nothing like the coldness I had received from my family. He said he had seen part of what happened, not the full scene, but enough to know it wasn't right. He didn't judge my brother harshly, but he didn't defend him either. Instead, he asked how I was feeling, and hearing someone ask that made something inside me loosen just a little. I told him a lighter version of the story, leaving out the deposit part at first, but he sensed I was holding back. When I finally mentioned it, he fell silent for several seconds. Then he said something that froze me. "You do know he's been having some issues, right?" My heart jumped. I asked what issues, but he hesitated, choosing his words carefully, like he wasn't sure how much he was allowed to share. He finally said my brother had been acting strange for months, short-tempered, secretive, taking calls outside, avoiding certain people. His wife had been stressed too, though she pretended nothing was wrong. He said some family members whispered that they were hiding something, maybe financial trouble again, maybe something else. I felt a wave of confusion, anger, and curiosity swirl inside me. My brother didn't talk to me about any of this. Yet he had no problem expecting my support without explaining what was actually happening. This added a new layer to the conflict, a deeper one. It wasn't just about disrespect or entitlement anymore. It felt like something in his life was spiraling, and instead of facing it, he was using me as a shield. But even then, I didn't know what that something was. After my call with David, I started looking at things differently. Every little detail, every memory, every conversation with my brother had new weight. I thought about the times he avoided showing me his phone screen, the way he rushed off whenever certain calls came in, how tense he had been even before the gathering. I remembered moments I had brushed off as mood swings, moments where he seemed both distracted and irritated at the same time. It all began to connect, but in a messy, incomplete way that only created more questions. To add to the growing tension, my parents started pressuring me again. My mother called twice, my father once. They didn't ask how I was doing, they asked when things would go back to normal. My father said something that stung more than he probably realized. Your brother has a family to think of. You know how much he carries. You're single, you're doing fine, you can manage. As if my worth depended on whether I fit their picture of responsibility. As if my feelings didn't matter because I lived alone and paid my own bills. As if being single meant I didn't deserve respect. I didn't argue, but inside, something cracked deeper. I started realizing that this wasn't just a conflict with my brother. It was a conflict with the entire unspoken structure of my family, the expectations, the roles, the favoritism, the way emotional responsibility was always placed on me simply because I never fought back. And even though I felt hurt, part of me still wondered if I was missing something important. Something that would explain why everyone was acting the way they were. A week later, I got my first real hint. I received a message from an unknown number. It wasn't a scam. It wasn't spam. It was a simple text. We need to talk about your brother. No name. No details. Just that. My chest tightened. I didn't reply immediately. I stared at the screen for minutes, my heart beating faster with every second. Eventually, I asked the only thing that made sense. Who is this? The reply was quick. Someone who's trying to help. The message didn't explain anything, but it didn't feel random. It felt connected to everything my cousin hinted at, everything my parents ignored, everything my brother wouldn't say. I asked what this was about, but the person didn't answer right away. Instead, they sent another message. If you stop supporting him, you should know what he's involved in. My throat went dry. The words, what he's involved in, echoed in my mind like a warning. I asked directly what they meant, but that time no reply came. The typing bubble appeared twice, then disappeared both times. After that, silence. It was the worst kind of suspense because now the conflict wasn't just emotional or financial. It felt like something bigger, something I didn't see coming, something that had been building behind the scenes while I was busy trying to hold the family together. I thought about calling my brother and asking him directly, but something inside me told me he wouldn't tell the truth. Not now. Not when he couldn't even admit how he treated me. The next day, my cousin reached out again. He said he remembered something I should hear. A few weeks before the gathering, my brother had gotten into a heated argument with someone outside his workplace. Not physical, but loud enough that people noticed. David said he didn't know the details, but some relatives thought it was tied to money. Money my brother owed, money he hadn't paid back, money that didn't belong to him. And suddenly, everything started aligning. The secrecy. The stress. The anger. The fear in his voice when asking about the canceled deposit. The pressure from his wife and my parents. The unknown number. The missing information. The conflict wasn't only about family disrespect anymore. It was about my brother possibly being tangled in something he didn't want anyone to know about, and he had been using my deposit as a way to keep himself afloat. But even with all these clues, the full truth remained just out of reach, like a shadow hiding behind a door I wasn't ready to open yet. The more I discovered, the more uneasy I felt. And I realized something important. Canceling that deposit didn't create a problem. It exposed one that had been growing long before I knew it existed. And whatever that problem was, it was getting closer, pulling me into the middle of it whether I wanted to be involved or not. But the most unsettling part? I still had no idea what was coming next. The days after the mysterious text felt unreal, like I was walking around with a secret I didn't fully understand. I kept checking my phone, half hoping the unknown sender would message again and half terrified they actually would. Every time my screen lit up, my heart raced. But they didn't contact me again. Instead, the silence grew thicker, pushing me deeper into questions I wasn't prepared for. My brother still hadn't apologized. He didn't try to explain himself. Instead, he sent 2 short messages asking if the deposit was coming back or not. No greeting, no concern, no recognition of what happened. It felt like he was more worried about the fallout of losing the money than the damage between us. I stared at the messages for a long time, trying to understand how someone I once admired could speak to me like that, especially after everything I had done for him. But then again, maybe I didn't know him as well as I thought. My cousin called again one evening after work. His tone was more serious this time, quieter, like he had been thinking about something and finally decided to share it. He told me he remembered overhearing 2 older relatives whispering about how my brother had been borrowing money from different places without telling anyone. Not banks, people. People who didn't take kindly to late payments. He said they weren't sure how deep it went, but he had heard my brother's name mentioned in a nervous, almost scared way. It made sense why he'd been acting so desperate. Why he reacted so strongly the moment I stopped supporting him. Why my parents were suddenly pushing me to make peace. They knew something or at least sensed something, but no one wanted to tell me directly. Maybe they thought shielding me was protecting me. Or maybe they thought I wouldn't understand. But what bothered me most was realizing that while everyone else was aware something was wrong, I was the only one being kept in the dark. Yet I was the one expected to fix it. As the pieces started coming together, the weight of everything pressed down on my chest. I kept thinking about that message from the unknown number. The warning. The choice of words. The timing. It felt too intentional to be a coincidence. Someone out there knew what my brother was involved in and they wanted me to know too. A part of me wondered if I should go to my parents' house and demand answers. But another part held back. I didn't want to accuse them without proof. And I didn't want to walk into another situation where my feelings were dismissed like they always were. The tension around me kept growing, like something was tightening little by little, waiting to snap. What made everything worse was when my brother's wife texted me late at night, something she never did. Her message was long, rushed, filled with nervous energy. She said things were difficult at home, and not like before. She said my brother wasn't sleeping. She said he was jumpy, irritated, constantly checking his phone. She finally admitted they were going through a complicated financial situation. But she didn't say what it was. She didn't admit how long it had been happening. She didn't acknowledge anything about the way I had been treated. She only asked if I could help one last time while they sort things out. Help one last time. I stared at those words until they blurred. I didn't respond. Instead, I put the phone down and sat in the dark, trying to breathe through the unease building inside me. Something inside me was shifting. A part of me still cared. Of course I cared. But another part was finally standing up, saying, no more. The next morning, my parents showed up at my door unannounced. My mother knocked lightly like she knew I wouldn't open if she knocked too hard. When I let them in, I could feel the tension before a single word was spoken. My father paced the living room. My mother sat on the edge of the sofa, clutching her hands like she was preparing herself. They didn't waste time. My father said my brother was overwhelmed. My mother said his wife was unstable these days. They insisted things were more complicated than I understood. But when I calmly asked them to explain, their answers turned vague. My father changed the subject. My mother said I didn't need to know everything. They spoke in circles, trying to convince me to bring back the deposit without giving me the reason behind their urgency. And then something slipped out. My father said, if he can't cover what he owes, it will become a bigger problem. My mother elbowed him lightly, but it was too late. A chill ran through me. I asked what he was talking about, but my father froze, realizing he had said too much. My mother forced a smile, insisting it wasn't what it sounded like. But the fear in her eyes gave away the truth. Something was very wrong. Something bigger than a missed bill. Something more serious than a simple loan. They didn't stay long after that. They left me with more questions than answers, and the sense that the conflict I had been pulled into was deeper than I ever expected. Later that night, I finally replied to the unknown number. I typed, what exactly is my brother involved in? This time they responded. You should meet me. It's about your safety too. My blood ran cold. This wasn't about a family argument anymore. This wasn't just a conflict between siblings or a misunderstanding blown out of proportion. This was something dangerous, something hidden beneath years of family secrets, excuses, and silence. I asked where we could meet, but the person replied with something that made my pulse jump. Before we meet, look at the account statements from the past year. Then you'll understand why he's afraid. I froze. I hadn't checked the old records since I set up the automatic transfer. I assumed everything was straightforward. I assumed the money went directly to him. But what if it didn't? What if there was more to this than I ever imagined? My hands shook as I opened my laptop. I logged into my account. My stomach twisted as I went through each month, one by one, noticing small things I had never paid attention to before, things that shouldn't have been there. Extra charges. Transfers I didn't make. Patterns that didn't add up. And then something hit me so hard I had to grip the table. The deposit wasn't the only thing tied to my brother. Someone else had been accessing my funds. My breath caught. My brother had access to my account at some point in the past, permissions I had forgotten about. Permissions he never mentioned. Permissions he never returned. The realization hit me like a wave. Whatever he was involved in, whatever he owed, whatever trouble he had fallen into, he might have dragged my name into it without telling me. The suspense grew so heavy it felt like the air around me shifted. The unknown number messaged again. We need to talk before things get worse. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding, knowing I was standing at the edge of something huge, something dark, something that could change everything I thought I knew about trust, loyalty, and family. And this time there was no turning back. For a moment, the room felt too small, as if the walls were closing in. Everything that had just happened was already heavy enough, but then a soft vibration broke the silence. It was a phone, someone's phone, lighting up on the table. No one wanted to check it, but everyone slowly turned their eyes toward the screen. The name glowing on it made the entire atmosphere shift again. It was the one person no one expected to hear from, the person everyone thought was long out of the picture. The tension shot up instantly, like the temperature in the room had dropped but the pressure had risen. He reached for the phone with a shaking hand, trying to keep his voice calm even though his heart was pounding. The message preview showed only a few words, but those words were enough to make everyone freeze. It hinted that the mysterious truth they thought they were already dealing with went even deeper. There was something hidden, something someone in the room had kept quiet this whole time. The sudden twist made the conflict feel bigger, heavier, like a shadow that had been sitting silently behind them was finally stepping into the light. Nobody spoke. They were all trying to make sense of what this message could mean. But before they could even ask questions, another notification popped up. This time it wasn't a message. It was a video. A new video. And the timestamp showed it had been recorded only minutes earlier. The blood drained from his face as he tapped it open, the screen brightening the dark tension around them. The video wasn't long, but it was enough to flip their understanding of everything. Someone was watching them. Not from far away. Not from the past. Someone close. Very close. The kind of close that felt uncomfortable, like the air around them had been disturbed without them noticing. The realization crawled slowly into their minds. This wasn't just a family conflict anymore. It wasn't just an emotional mess or old wounds reopening. This was bigger. And the truth, which they thought was finally coming out, had only touched the surface. A soft crackling sound came from the hallway and everyone's heads snapped toward the door. It wasn't loud, but in a moment like this, even the smallest noise felt like a warning. He stood up slowly, his eyes locked on the door as if expecting someone to push it open any second. The others stayed still, barely breathing, waiting for something to happen. The suspense was thick, the kind that makes every heartbeat feel too loud. He stepped into the hallway, moving carefully, scanning every corner. The house felt different now, less like home, more like a place full of hidden things. He noticed something on the floor near the wall, something small and out of place. When he bent down to pick it up, the realization made a cold wave run through him. It shouldn't have been there. It didn't belong to anyone in the house. And that meant someone had been inside earlier without them knowing. The stakes suddenly felt higher than ever. This second twist didn't just surprise them, it changed the whole direction of their understanding. The conflict wasn't just about the arguments, misunderstandings, or the emotional storm they had been facing. Someone outside their circle, someone with a reason, someone with access, had tangled themselves into their story. He returned to the room with the object in hand, and when the others saw it, they all exchanged looks filled with fear, confusion, and a growing realization that something far worse was unfolding. They weren't just dealing with tension anymore. They were standing on the edge of the climax without even knowing what was waiting for them on the other side. Everything felt unpredictable now. Trust was shaky. The truth felt scattered. And a new, dangerous layer of the story was slowly revealing itself, pushing them deeper into uncertainty. The suspense hovered in the room like a storm cloud, ready to break at any moment. and none of them knew what the next minute would bring. The room went silent again, but this time the silence felt heavier than before. Everyone kept staring at the small object he had found in the hallway. It was something so ordinary, yet so out of place here, and the fact that it didn't belong to anyone in the house made the truth hit them hard. Whoever had been watching them wasn't just sending messages or videos from somewhere far away. They had been inside, close enough to hear them, close enough to slip something into the hallway without being noticed. That thought alone made the tension nearly unbearable. He took a deep breath and finally said what no one else wanted to say out loud. They needed to check the rest of the house. The others hesitated, but they knew he was right. They moved carefully, sticking close together as they searched each room. Every corner felt suspicious now. Every shadow felt deeper. The air felt tight with the pressure of everything they had learned and everything they still didn't understand. When they reached the back room, the one nobody had used in months, something felt off immediately. The door was open just a little, like someone had pushed it and forgotten to close it. He stepped inside first, and the moment he flicked on the light, the truth jumped out at them. On the old desk was a small device, one that definitely hadn't been there before. A camera. Not one that belonged to the family. A camera that had been recording them. His heart dropped. All the arguments, the emotional moments, the confessions, they weren't just shared between them. Someone else had been listening. Watching. Collecting pieces of their lives like a puzzle. The main conflict they'd been struggling with suddenly felt different because it wasn't just theirs anymore. Someone had used their private fears and misunderstandings to push them deeper into chaos. But as they stood there, shocked and confused, the camera blinked. A tiny red light flashed twice. Then the screen on its side lit up. A short message appeared, and the moment he read it, everything snapped into place. It wasn't from an outsider. It wasn't from a stranger. It was from someone connected to them more closely than any of them expected. The message revealed the final truth. The person behind all of this wasn't trying to harm them. They were trying to force the family to face everything they kept avoiding. The unresolved pain. The secrets. The bitterness. The distance. The camera, the messages, the strange object in the hallway, they were all ways to push the family to finally confront the real issues they had buried for years. But just when they thought they understood, the twist hit them. A second message appeared on the tiny screen. This one wasn't from the same person. It was new, written in a tone that felt colder, sharper, unfamiliar. It said they weren't the only ones watching. Someone else had been following the situation quietly, waiting for the perfect moment to step in. And now that everything was exposed, this unknown person claimed they had one more truth to reveal, something even the first messenger didn't know. The room felt like it shifted. They had reached the climax, the moment where everything had come out, where the confusions were finally clear. The main conflict between them had exploded and settled, leaving them shaken but understanding each other more honestly than before. But now this final twist, this unexpected voice entering their story, left them with a new kind of tension. They stepped back from the desk, realizing that this wasn't just about old wounds anymore. Someone new was stepping into the picture, someone whose reasons were still hidden, someone who had been waiting for this exact moment. The family conflict was resolved, the truth was out, but another layer had just been added, one that changed everything again. And as the blinking camera slowly powered off, they all felt the same thing. The climax wasn't just about what had happened. It was about what would happen next. And none of them were ready for it. The blinking camera finally went dark, leaving a stillness in the room that felt almost unreal after everything that had happened. No one moved at first. It was like they needed a moment to breathe, to let the rush of fear and shock drain out of their bodies. The second message, short, cold, and unexplained, hung in the air like a heavy cloud. But slowly, as reality settled, they realized something important. The danger they felt wasn't actually danger. The mystery that seemed threatening was really someone's desperate attempt to make them face each other, to stop pretending everything was fine when it clearly wasn't. He looked around at the family members who had been drifting apart for so long. His brother's face tense and tired. His sister-in-law's worried eyes. The kids, unsure of what was happening but sensing the tension. And for the first time in what felt like years, he saw them not as people who pushed him away, but as people who were also scared, confused, and trying to protect what they cared about. The once sharp anger that lived between them began to fade, replaced by something softer and more honest. Finally, his brother cleared his throat. It was the same brother who once yelled, "Don't come near my children, you're not family," the sentence that had shattered everything. But now his voice had none of that harshness. He quietly said he was sorry. Not just for the outburst, but for all the years of letting pride and misunderstandings turn into barriers. He admitted how stressed he had been, how pressured he felt to keep his own household stable, and how fear made him push away the one person who had always shown loyalty. Hearing him speak like that didn't erase what was said in the past, but it opened a door that had been locked for too long. His sister-in-law stepped in next, explaining how she often felt caught in the middle, wanting peace but not knowing how to create it. She confessed she had never wanted him to feel unwelcome or judged. Even the kids hugged him gently, sensing the shift, reassured by the calmer voices around them. Slowly, the family that had been breaking apart began to take shape again, fragile but hopeful. The emotional conflict that had fueled the whole story finally landed in a place where everyone could see the truth clearly. When they talked about the mysterious camera and the messages, they realized it wasn't as complicated as it seemed. The first message, the one that tried to shock them into facing each other, had come from a cousin who lived out of town. He had noticed the tension growing through small comments, canceled plans, and quiet distance. He knew they wouldn't talk honestly unless something forced them to, and though his method was strange, his intention came from concern. The second message, the cold one, turned out to be nothing dramatic. It was just a glitch, an automated warning from the device's internal settings, misinterpreted in the moment because everyone was already on edge. The fear made them imagine something darker. With everything clear, the family decided to take a simple step. They unplugged the camera, packed up the small device, and agreed to talk face-to-face from now on. No more secrets, no more silent assumptions, no more letting small issues grow into storms. The main conflict that had spiraled out of control was finally addressed, not with anger but with understanding. Later that night, when the house grew quiet again, he sat alone at the kitchen table. He thought about the monthly deposit he had canceled, the support he had been giving without expecting anything in return. It wasn't about money, it was about feeling connected, feeling appreciated. When he canceled it, he had done it out of hurt, trying to protect himself from being treated like an outsider. And for a long time he believed it was the right decision. But now, after hearing their apologies and seeing the truth behind their actions, he felt something shift inside him. He didn't immediately say he would start sending the deposit again. Instead, he told his brother they needed to rebuild slowly. Trust didn't return in a night. But he said he wouldn't let bitterness control him anymore. His brother agreed, understanding that healing would take time. For the first time in a long while, they were on the same page. Over the next few days, things changed in small but meaningful ways. His brother invited him over more often, not out of obligation but out of genuine effort. The kids talked to him with excitement again, telling him about school and little stories they couldn't wait to share. His sister-in-law called just to check in, something she had never done before. These tiny moments, woven together, slowly rebuilt something real. He also decided to call the cousin who had started everything with that strange plan. Instead of being angry, he thanked him for caring enough to step in, though he made sure to tell him never to use a hidden camera again. They both laughed, and that laugh helped close another small wound. As time passed, the family found a new rhythm. Not perfect, not magically fixed, but better. More honest. More human. They realized that misunderstandings grow easily when people stay silent, and that assumptions can turn family into strangers if no one speaks up. The story that had been full of conflict and tension finally settled into a meaningful lesson about communication and forgiveness. In the end, he chose to restart the monthly support, but this time with clearer boundaries and open discussion. It wasn't a hidden sacrifice anymore, it was a mutual decision, based on respect rather than expectation. His brother accepted it with gratitude instead of entitlement, acknowledging the value behind it. Looking back, he understood something powerful. Families don't fall apart because of one fight or one hurtful sentence. They fall apart when people stop trying to understand each other. And families don't heal from one apology either. They heal when everyone decides to show up, keep listening, and keep working on the relationship. The final twist in the story wasn't the camera or the messages. It was the realization that sometimes the biggest conflict in a family is the silence between them. What mattered most was that the silence was finally broken. And as he walked out of the house one evening, hearing the kids call out for him to come back soon, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: peace. The story that began with rejection, tension, and confusion ended with connection, clarity, and a reminder that even the most complicated relationships can find their way back with honesty and effort. It wasn't a perfect ending, but it was a real one. And sometimes that's the most satisfying ending of all.